This week on The Record, the power of the president.
We have to save St. Louis.
Will St. Louis see a surge in federal agents? Might that include the National Guard? One Republican hopes so. House Republican Justin Sparks is on the record. Is free speech under fire? Why local TV stations pressured a national network to yank a celebrity comedian off the airwaves, and what the federal government had to do with it. Remembering Jim Edgar, Illinois' popular Republican governor, dead at 79. All this right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. Newsrooms across this city spent a lot of time this week trying to decipher what exactly President Trump meant when he said this.
He said, "Sir, please do me a favor. St. Louis has been so badly hit. It's very hard, very, very hard." He said, "Don't lose Chicago."
He said St. Louis is in big trouble.
He's going to save these cities. This isn't like, we're going to do something. We have to save St. Louis. We have to save Chicago. We think Chicago is going to be next, and we'll get to St. Louis.
The president floating the idea of a federal crime crackdown during his remarks about a joint federal task force underway soon in Memphis. But there, too, the actual language of the presidential memo rests on local power. Trump asks the Pentagon to request the Tennessee governor to activate the Guard there. Often, governors look to local leaders like mayors to define the scope and the duration of those missions.
I don't believe the National Guard should be involved in fighting crime, but where the National Guard has been helpful to the city of St. Louis in the past is in debris removal. And I do believe there have been some positive movements, positive actions on the part of the National Guard in the D.C. area with regards to community cleanups and that sort of thing. Those missions would be welcome here and certainly are needed.
Perhaps a federal crackdown could include some other agency, maybe Immigration and Customs Enforcement, like those videos we've seen in other big American cities. Immigrant business owners in Dutchtown, just in South City, are already pinning small signs in their storefront windows warning people to be aware and to know their rights.
I don't like the thought of ICE around, if I'd have wanted that, I wouldn't have come here, I'd have gone to Russia.
And experts who study the exercise of military power on domestic turf say there are bright lines that cannot be crossed.
When they're working in the state, they're not subject to the national law called the Posse Comitatus Act. So the Posse Comitatus Act says we cannot use our active force to do law enforcement inside the borders of the United States, essentially.
House Republican and Freedom Caucus member Justin Sparks now on the record from Wildwood. Good to have you with us for your maiden voyage on the program here.
Thank you for having me.
You've called for the National Guard. You've called on Governor Kehoe to activate the National Guard. Why the National Guard? What can they do that local and federal agents cannot?
Sure. Before I joined the legislature, I was a police officer in St. Louis County, but also a deputized U.S. Marshal on the Eastern District Task Force. And what I know is essentially self-evident and common knowledge that more boots on the ground help crime go down. Here's what I mean by that. What we've seen in Washington, D.C., and what we're going to see in other cities that are struggling like St. Louis is the National Guard can be a presence. And by being a presence, the criminal element sees the National Guard and they stop committing crimes. This is not rocket science. This is what works. And it will allow the St. Louis City police officers to do more, like responding to crimes and actually getting justice for citizens in the city of St. Louis. What the mayor should say, what the president of the Board of Aldermen should say, Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter. They should simply say, "Thank you, Mr. President. We'll take all the help we can get."
Let's look at the scope of that, because I wonder about the mission. That's what you hear the governor and the mayor often say. What will be their mission? The Guard is trained, as you know, for natural disasters like tornadoes and floods, not necessarily for community policing. So how would calling guardsmen and women off of their day jobs and ordering them to patrol neighborhoods in St. Louis for a few weeks, perhaps, how would that reduce crime in St. Louis over the long term?
It 100% works, and I'll tell you why I know that.
For how long?
Well, great question. As long as needed. Until the crime and violent crime goes down, until police officers can start responding to property crimes, actually following up and conducting investigations, which they can't do right now. You talk to any police officer in the city of St. Louis and they'll confirm what I'm telling you right now. In Ferguson, you remember the National Guard actually was deployed. And how that helped us was, I was on the SWAT team at the time.
There are no riots in St. Louis right now.
That's true. But what they were able to do is we could not respond to normal violent crimes or property crimes because we had to be in the corridor in Ferguson.
So are they standing watch over a certain piece of property or
Exactly. They could be a presence. Simply by their presence alone, we know that when the criminal element sees law and order, in whether it be police officers in a police car or National Guardsmen, that represents what is most important, the pillar of our society, which is law and order, and they're not going to commit crimes.
You're a fiscal conservative?
Yes.
What would be the price tag of something like this?
It's a great question. I don't know.
Missouri picks up the tab, I presume. St. Louis picks up the tab.
Well, here's what I think is most important. I think it's worth it. Some things are worth spending money on. Crime, public order, safety, keeping people safe, that's worth every dollar.
But you would acknowledge that the cost to call a National Guardsman or woman off of their job and to deploy them with that heavy equipment is far more expensive per person than it would be to hire more police officers, than it would be to send in federal agents. The cost per person is significantly higher.
But here's the thing, when you're going to hire a police officer, do you have any idea how long it takes to actually hire a police officer? By the way, because of defund the police, because of people like Megan Green, who have called for defunding the police publicly now, this is the president of the Board of Aldermen in the city of St. Louis, we can't get good
Who no longer
qualified...
has any control over the police.
Correct, thank God. But we can't get good qualified police officers to actually want to do the job because they don't have the support of their administration in, like, the mayor's office.
I hear you. Last question for you quickly in the time we have, and I
Sure.
appreciate the conversation, but what do you say to people who say this is more of a show of force, a symbol, than a solution?
I think it's still amazing. Even if it's just a show of force, it will 100% help. We've seen it work before, and we'll see it work again.
Representative Sparks, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Coming up, FEMA help on the horizon, the bipartisan effort to help heal North City.
That the city of St. Louis is getting its private property debris removal assistance from FEMA.
Federal help is coming to St. Louis. More federal help, that is. Mayor Kara Spencer announcing Wednesday morning FEMA will kick in an extra $180 million to help remove all that tornado debris left over from 4 months ago. It'll cover about 70% of the expected debris removal cost, the state picking up the other 25%. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will also be on the ground advising local contractors who will do the heavy lifting.
This is an enormous task, one that residents have been unable to take on themselves, and one that is so large that the city could not handle on its own as well. And so we're looking forward to the partnership here on this.
Governor Mike Kehoe and Senator Eric Schmidt also worked to bring FEMA resources to the city in a rare bipartisan effort with Mayor Spencer. Officials don't quite know when the removal will start just yet. Missouri activists are collecting signatures to fight against Missouri's new congressional map. The group People, Not Politicians is pushing together more than 107,000 signatures across Missouri to trigger a voter referendum.
Given the amount of support we've already seen coming from Missourians about this, we are going to turn in well in excess of those numbers. This is simply about how democracy should work, and that people should be at the center of our democracy, not politicians.
Deadline, December 11. Just putting that question on the ballot alone, that act might delay those new maps until after the midterms. After the redistricting special session gavelled out, Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe reappointed all 5 of his original picks to take over control of the St. Louis Police Board of Commissioners. Kehoe withdrew them earlier this month when he called that special session. If he didn't, the law would require them to hold those confirmation hearings within 30 days. Those Senate hearings still on schedule for January when the legislative session gavels back in. Coming up, a crackdown on Kirk comments takes a late-night host off the air. We look at whether a bold warning from the FCC has legal standing. Is free speech alive and well, or is the First Amendment under attack in America? These are the central questions that stem from ABC's recent decision to remove Jimmy Kimmel from the airwaves. The national Disney-owned network faced pressure from its partners, like local TV station owners, after Kimmel characterized Trump supporters and Charlie Kirk's assassin like this.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Remarks came off more like sneering insults rather than carrying a punchline. It contained half-truths and perhaps misleading subtext. Yes, a lot of Trump-supporting media figures and politicians did spend a lot of their time over that weekend illustrating the ways Kirk's assassin was not one of their own. The issue with Kimmel's remark, though, is that those MAGA voices were right on those facts. While there may have been some initial digital clues that led some web sleuths to draw up theories suggesting maybe the assassin's language might have at times aligned or overlapped with some far-right chat room terminology, Those theories never led law enforcement to prove a direct link there. In fact, those theories were later rebutted and contradicted by the firm evidence that law enforcement has produced to the public. So as a broadcaster, yes, even a comic who regularly insults or mocks the president, there is still a broadcast duty to adhere to facts. It's a duty that comedians often take seriously, and cable networks and the president himself, they're not bound to those same rules. The chairman of the FCC was sure to remind local broadcasters and their corporate owners of that very obligation when he went on a podcast with right-wing MAGA influencer Benny Johnson.
You know, when you look at the conduct that has taken place by Jimmy Kimmel, it appears to be some of the sickest conduct possible. I think, you could certainly see a path forward for suspension over this. And again, the FCC is going to have remedies that we could look at.
It was swift. Nexstar, the nation's largest owner of local TV stations, announced its, quote, difficult decision to preempt Jimmy Kimmel live in all 32 ABC-affiliated stations that it owns across the country. Nexstar's CEO, Perry Sook, could soon become my boss. He was once before at a station I used to work at. His company recently announced a $6.2 billion deal to buy Tegna, the company that owns this TV station. For that deal to go through, the FCC would need to relax media ownership rules that are designed to prevent monopolies from controlling the airwaves and stifling the free flow of information. Chairman Brendan Carr has significant influence over that process. So the business motive was clear. So is the Supreme Court precedent. After a 9-0 ruling last year, where the court said unanimously, government officials cannot attempt to coerce private parties in order to punish or suppress views that the government disfavors. We featured another high-profile Supreme Court case over free speech in this digital age on this very program 18 months ago. Before he was a U.S. Senator, Missouri's Attorney General Eric Schmidt sued the Biden administration for trying to influence the way big tech companies might throttle, muzzle, or slow the speed of controversial statements that you see on your social media feeds. Here's what Senator Schmidt said about that last March.
I think this administration has shown a willingness to go cross that line. But if the threat is, if you don't censor the way we want you to censor, we're going to take away your Section 230 protections, that's pretty explicit.
In that case, the Supreme Court, even with its conservative majority, ultimately disagreed as justices raised questions about the line between government communications officials persuading and coercing. We turn now to Connor Fitzpatrick, a supervising senior attorney at the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, or FIRE. That's a legal defense group that advocates fiercely for free speech. Connor, good to have you with us. The FCC's licensing authority is a pretty big stick. So when an FCC chair suggests that broadcasters might lose their licenses over what a national late-night host says, is that just tough talk, fair game, or do you think it crosses the line into government coercion of speech?
It absolutely crosses the line. We know from both federal law and Supreme Court precedent that the FCC cannot use its regulatory authority to infringe on free speech. And let's be clear about something. The government is not supposed to like the media. The media is there to cover the government. Comedians are there to make fun of those who are in power. The government should never be in the business of trying to use its regulatory authority to threaten and coerce media entities away from unfavorable coverage.
Even if no broadcast licenses ever get pulled at the local level, what's the danger in government officials making these kinds of threats as it might pertain to the broader chilling effect on free speech? What message could it send to broadcasters and ultimately to the public about who gets to decide what's acceptable on the air?
The danger is the chill. We should never be in a position where our newspapers and our TV stations and our reporters who we count on to hold the government accountable are fearful that if they report something that's unfavorable about those in power, that the government is going to come against them. Our First Amendment protects a free press and free speech for a reason, because coverage of government is often going to be unfriendly. So anytime a government, from whatever party, decides that they are going to try and alter a media company's coverage of them by threatening regulatory action against them, everyone, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, or Green, should be up in arms in defense of free speech.
Connor Fitzpatrick, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then on Wednesday morning, perhaps a more nuanced take. FCC Chairman Brendan Carr appeared on CNBC, that cable network, to address the criticism that perhaps he'd exerted undue influence over a comedian's right to free speech.
The check on that content is not the government. It's not me here at the FCC. It's your local TV station. But if they want to keep access to those valuable airwaves, I've been clear. We're reinvigorating the FCC's enforcement of public interest.
All right, WashU law professor Greg Megarian is now on the record. Professor, good to have you with us. You've studied the First Amendment and the Supreme Court's handling of speech cases for decades. I want to ask you, Chairman Carr keeps saying that broadcasters have to serve the public interest. Certainly, I would agree that there's a public interest in what we do, but is that a neutral standard the government can set, or are you seeing it morph into more of a political cudgel?
It's supposed to be a neutral standard. It's in the Federal Communications Act, the law way back at the dawn of radio that governs broadcast licenses. It is not a standard that the government is ever supposed to manipulate, mold to serve government purposes.
Have you seen that here?
Absolutely, yes.
If these decisions were made at the local level, as the chairman has suggested, it's hard to see evidence of that now. It looks more like these decisions came from corporate boardrooms from these publicly traded companies who have pending business before the FCC. So do you see this as a genuine local decision-making process, or the federal government perhaps even nudging these local TV stations to break up with the national networks?
I don't think it particularly matters whether the decision is being made by the local affiliates or by the corporate top level. The threat is coming from the government, and in either of those scenarios is coercing the decision.
Even if the FCC chairman just said, hey, as a local station, remember, you have judgment here, you have discretion.
Oh, after the FCC chairman has said, and after others in the administration have said, we're going to take action against entities that we don't like. Just today, the president said 97% of broadcasters are against me and they should lose their licenses. Mm-hmm. It doesn't get much more blatant than that.
There's also, he said Jimmy Kimmel is no Johnny Carson. I think there's a case to be made there that there are a few comedians who can resonate with the broad swath of the country anymore in this digital age with all these. I mean, is there a place, is there a future where the marketplace and the consumers can sort of pick their late night TV show host?
Oh yeah, I think we are in that era of sort of cultural breakdown and fragmentation. That's a fascinating conversation about popular culture, but that doesn't have anything to do with the government's proper prerogative to say who's a good comedian and who should be on the air.
You wrote, in the big picture, you wrote this book called Managed Speech about how the Roberts Court has handled First Amendment disputes. How does what we're seeing now compare with past clashes between government power and free expression in America?
That book of mine came out in 2017, and I thought things were going pretty badly then, and I am nostalgic for that era now. The threats that we are seeing now are more direct, more severe, and more varied than anything we've seen from the government in my lifetime.
Do you expect lawsuits here?
Absolutely.
How will they go if you had to predict?
It's difficult to say exactly who will bring the lawsuits and how they will shake out, so it's hard for me to say. The thing that's really kind of scary is ABC has capitulated. ABC should be the entity that's resisting and standing up for its free speech rights, and ABC has decided it's a bad business decision to stand up for free speech.
It's the opinion of this newsman that our local viewers should have the confidence that when they turn on their news, they have someone there whose voice is speaking freely, fearlessly, independently, without strings attached from some corporate boardroom or from Wall Street or from the federal government. What advice do you have in the last few seconds we have here to journalists who would exercise that right as an American?
It's a hard time. It's a scary time. You've got to draw on your inner courage and just keep fighting and keep doing your job in exactly the way you described. That's what we need.
All right. Professor Megarian, thank you very much. We look forward to checking in with you perhaps as this story unravels, and we'll learn a lot more about that. Plus, we have a lot more of our conversation with Connor Fitzpatrick up on our website, ksdk.com. You can also find it for free on the 5 Plus app tomorrow night during an extended episode of this program, The Record. He served 2 terms as the governor of Illinois. Jim Edgar died this week. He was 79. Let's check the record. After Jim Edgar left public office, the moderate downstate Republican founded the Edgar Fellows. That's where he devoted much of his life after public office to teaching younger generations how they could meaningfully engage and impact public policy to make our state a better place. I arrived to begin reporting in Springfield long after his days in office were over. But the longer I covered that beat, the more I felt his lingering impact through that exercise of soft power. See, Governor Edgar had a willing army of disciples, people who he won over and enlisted to his cause through his warmth, his candor, and his patience. Eventually, I would learn that he still had that eagerness to engage the hot issues of the day. He always wanted to persuade. He'd always pick up the phone or call me back just as soon as he could if I had a question, and no question was beneath him. That's kind of rare in a field full of self-centered egos. He had those qualities that put others first. So let the record reflect. Jim Edgar was a true public servant who put the people of Illinois before his own personal ambitions and made tough calls when they presented themselves. That's all for us this week. Until next time, we're off the record.